Okay, recording now. Okay, it's been a while. It's been a while again.
It's like more like what, 6 months or plus minus, or five?
Yeah.
No, 5 months or something like that, plus minus. Yeah.
So, Russian offensive, winter offensive, was pretty much complete failure.
I would say it wasn't even much of an offensive, really. Honestly, it was just, I don't even know what he. I think it was, how you call it, like in English, much ado about nothing.
Complete waste
So it
of
wasn't
resources.
really anything except for, I mean, but this Wagner group, but that's completely different story. It's like separate. It's like they not sort of part of the whole story. You know what I mean? Because when there was announcement of the Russian offensive, it was referring to regular Russian army, not to Wagner mercenaries, right? Because they do their own thing in a way. It's like it's a separate world. I mean, now it's becoming, I think, much more clear to everyone when there is this kind of like fighting. Well, not kind of, but actually is a real fight, like sort of fighting between the sides.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we go back last summer, I'm trying to understand. So, do you have an idea what Russian leadership was thinking? What was their idea? Because now hindsight,
I think they actually the what's the name of spokesperson for Russian president. I think well, last name is Pskov. I don't remember her first name. He actually said that they did not expect that the West will sort of join this whole thing. They were sort of expecting situations similar to Georgia in 2008. If you remember, there was I think it was called eight days war or something like that. It was in August of 2008. They invaded Georgia, and Georgia folded, and the whole thing sort of folded basically. So in any case, he just said like a day ago something that they were not expecting West to get there so that West will not provide this kind of support to Ukraine. And so that was the expectation. And so, which also kind of tells about like really bad planning, bad thinking, just really not thinking, because it was very clear that, in particular, US and UK will participate in a meaningful way because they were bringing weapons to Ukraine before this whole thing started. I think they were like delivering weapons starting sometime in, I don't remember, like I think fall of 21, but definitely was like in December there were deliveries, in January a lot of delivery. Like it was like very clear. They were showing clear sign like, hey, we're gonna sort of join this fight, right? And there was even like I would say speeches from US president saying we're gonna join this fight. So there was, and actually, if you really think about this, like how US quickly withdrew, like in total sort of, people say panic, but whatever, in a massive way from Afghanistan, right? It was very clear, and it was actually, if you remember, it was August of 21 or September. I don't remember. I think it was August 21. It was clear sign that US is withdrawing troops, so it has troops to fight with Russia. So like all indications were there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yet they decided to disregard those indications, meaning Russian president and all of those people who really like make decisions and thinking together and all of that. So, it tells you about the level of, well, I would say, not high intelligence. I guess that's what I can say.
But after a couple of months of full-scale invasion in Russian leadership, there must have been somebody must have known like this isn't going to end soon.
Yeah, they probably understood it after day 3 or day 4.
So
they
were
realized.
they on denial?
But then what are they going to do if they say, no, well, it was a big mistake, they're going to lose power in Russia. So they have no choice. They need to double down all the time. They will be doubling down until there is this 1917 moment that I said in Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, you see this. Who's that? This Prigozhin is basically, you know, kind of like saying, "Hey, this is this is basically there is, you know, how to say, not a conflict, but there is definitely tension there
Mm.
inside of Russia, inside of, and I'm not talking inside of like general Russian population. No, I'm talking about the Russian sort of ruling class.
Hmm.
Probably that's the best way to describe it, right?
Yep. And it seems like Russia has learned nothing. Because to me, it appears Russia is in exactly the same state right now as late summer last year.
Yeah, I mean, there was very minor gains. Say, what did they gain? I guess they captured Lysychansk, and I think they captured last, I think it was June, they captured Severodonetsk,
Hmm.
and then I think July they captured Lysychansk. And I mean, in this Bakhmut is sort of I call it torturing it, uh, meaning torturing themselves to capture this Bakhmut.
Mm.
Uh, but but yeah, like there is not much to show for them.
And now
I
Russia is
think
low on manpower again.
their peak was really in August of 2022, and then it's kind of like going downhill for Russia. Well, in a very clear way, right? The first downhill was very clear when they had to withdraw from northern and northeastern Ukraine, right?
Mm.
That was, I think, that was sort of like very like defining moment for anyone who sort of pays attention. Okay, they effectively lost. You know, there's still long war, you know, but they lost that war. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like it's like you know, Stalingrad for Germany, or even not even Stalingrad, actually Battle of Moscow in what, December 1941. You know, Germany lost. It was clear that they lost the war. It just, but the war dragged out till like what, you know, May of 1945 for another whatever years.
Mm.
What's 42? So three and a change years,
Yeah.
right? So this is very clear. I mean, unless things somehow change in the West and there is some drastic change in the attitude and no support, then sure, Ukraine will lose this war. I mean, not Ukraine, West will lose this war because
Mm.
Ukraine will simply become part of Russia, and then Russia will start attacking other countries in the West, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
hard
then
to.
China will try to take over Taiwan, and you know, I mean,
Mm.
this is in a way it's very clear if uh and I'm talking about the West. I'm not even talking from Ukrainian perspective, because Ukrainian perspective is very simple: is Ukraine wants to have its own independence, and yes, it has terrible government. There's no question about it, but it's not a
Mm.
reason not to have independence. Do you know what I mean? But from bigger picture perspective, from the West, you, and this is what's sort of part of the West realizes, part of the West does not realize. If Ukraine is lost, it means the West has lost, and it means that this is sort of similar to what happened with the Russian withdrawal from northern Ukraine and eastern Ukraine. It's a first step to eventual complete destruction and demise of the West. And so
Mm.
this is kind of like what's on the table right now. Besides just Ukraine's destiny, its own destiny, because you know I'm obviously, you know, interested more in Ukrainian destiny, but everybody is in the same boat in a way. You know what I mean?
Yep. Okay, let's go back in time a few more decades.
Yep.
Let's say in 90s, uh, how was the relationship Ukraine and Belarus and other neighbors?
I mean, with
Um,
Belarus was always fine relationship. Never. How to say? I don't know. I never any sort of problem. I mean, how to say? in a way, there was sort of no relationship between the countries, but it was great because nobody, tries to kind of like force one side, like, there's no government meddling in the relationship. So it was just normal relationship. There was no ever any problems with Belarus at all.
Has this been a big shock to Ukraine that Belarus is actively involved in this invasion?
No, it's not. It's not. Well, I mean, no, it's not a big shock. It was very clear. Actually, the fact that this is going to happen and it's somewhere close. The first clue was actually summer of 2020 in Belarus when, if you remember, Russia sort of there was elections in Belarus in summer of 2020, and effectively, Russia forced this Belarus president who was trying to be like sort of, in the middle between West and Russia, right? He tried to manage his own thing. He actually tried to be independent and sort of act in the interest of Belarus from the way he saw that interest, right? We can sort of say, yeah, that he's crazy views, whatever, but he tried to be actually independent and act like in the interest of Belarus the way he saw it, right? And but he was not popular in Belarus. And so Russia used that moment to actually incentivize him to use the sort of brutal force to basically gain the power, right? He's basically becoming a dictator in Belarus. But then that effectively means that he's totally dependent on Russia. He's becoming Russia's puppet. Like whatever they tell him, well, not whatever, but like let's say pretty much everything, whatever they tell, he has to do that. And once he's in Russia's pocket, why? There's no surprise in my view.
Yep.
Like it was very clear to me. I think people were willing. They basically what I would say is this: people are lying because it's convenient to say, "Oh, I didn't see it." If you cared, you saw it. Do you know what I mean? But for many people, it was convenient not to see. For whatever personal reasons they have. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so they didn't see it. I mean, they now claim they didn't see it, but it was like, it was so visible, it was so clear what's gonna happen there. Because Russian troops were already in Belarus in I think in early 2021. So I mean, why would you think that they're not gonna use Belarus? I mean, but it was very clear. Like it's a lie basically by people who, if someone says, "Oh, I didn't see it coming," he's either has no idea like about the whole situation or lying. There's no other way. Or stupid. Like one of the three. Sort of either very stupid or lying.
How about Moldova? Is there much connection with Moldova, Ukrainians and Moldova?
No, not really. There is a connection in terms of like it's a part of the Soviet Union, but there's no strong like economic connection. There is natural gravitation of Moldova because it's so small that Ukraine is kind of like natural, one of the big markets.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of the old sort of legacy of the Soviet Union. So there is sort of, but there's no special on the country level. It's actually very similar to what's going on with Belarus in many ways, right? So there's no government meddling, there's no government anything there, just purely, whatever economic ties. But there's nothing, Moldova doesn't have much that's sort of interesting for Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't have much that's interesting for Moldova. Do you know what I mean? So it's just nothing special.
if Ukraine was
I would say
victorious,
I would say peaceful, if that's what you, in a
okay,
good way, peaceful. Let's put this way. There
okay,
were never any tensions or anything. The same, by the way, with Belarus. Never ever any tensions. No, never ever even people say, "Oh, this is our part," or "This is their part." You know, never ever this kind of like even argument about anything. So this is like two countries where I would say probably three countries where Ukraine has like totally zero tension at all
hmm
and never had.
is from your what you know about Moldova, is Moldova ready to join West if they were able to?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think my take on Moldova is that um here's the problem with in Moldova, that the government that they have right now, that so-called pro-Western, they are pretty terrible at governing. So actually they creating problems in like they terrible they actually discredit the whole idea of joining the West in Moldova.
Okay.
And so there is a significant portion of population that's just kind of seeing that and like we don't like we kind of like not terribly excited to move anywhere. We're kind of happy with the status quo because we on one side we're protected by Ukraine, the other side we next door to the West, and what's you know, let's just kind of keep the status quo.
Mm-hmm. I tried
But I mean,
to.
they not like saying like, oh, we pro Russian, we want to be part of Russia. There's definitely not that part in. I mean, there's that like sort of part of Moldova, which is actually old Ukrainian territories, where there's a lot of people who were brought from various parts of the Soviet Union during Soviet Union time, and they are very sort of not even pro-Russian. They still sort of, oh, we want to be part of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union has gone. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of like slowly dying territory.
Yep. I tried to do a little bit research, Ukraine during World War One, and it was quite complex. I couldn't really understand
Oh yeah,
exactly
no,
what's
that
going
was
on.
Ukraine was torn for a long time between many countries. Ukraine was torn essentially between since about 1241.
Mm,
It was split into pieces and existed under control of different as sort of pieces of the puzzle.
mm-hmm. So it was early last
So
century the
Ukraine was
first.
sort of reassembled in full in essentially 1945. So think about this: you have like piece of glass. It was broken in 1241. The pieces were sort of separated from each other, and then they were reassembled in 1945. And actually, they not fully reassembled, if but it is what it is. It's just
Mm-hmm.
because some of the like what's part of the Russia right now, they really like Ukrainian territories. But
Okay.
that's okay. I mean, Ukraine sort of accepts that, and part of actually Belarus are sort of Ukrainian territories, but that's sort of like Ukraine does not have this like, oh, like, you know, it used to be part of Ukraine, you know, it's Ukrainian, give it back to us. Sort of what Russia has, what let's say Hungary has, and then like I would say Poland doesn't say that anymore, or at least like not openly saying it, and Romania is not openly saying. But in the past, there were tensions between, let's say, Romania and Poland and Ukraine. But those are sort of like dormant, sort of ish like problems, right? They're not active, they're dormant, and hopefully they will. But you know, Hungary and Russia, they actively sort of pushing their sort of agendas.
Mm-hmm. So now it's the fight for true independence. pretty much.
It is actually, this is correct. This is really the start of the true fight for independence. 100% correct. Because before, in a way, this is really like, how to say, this is the real fall of Soviet Union, what we see really right now. So it was kind of like in the kind of like for this whatever 30 years, it was kind of like bubbling up there, sort of like preparing for the actual blowout, and then really what's happening right now is really what fall of the Soviet Union. So in a way, it was delayed by 30 years. So people were living in this kind of like transitory state for this 30 whatever 31 year, and finally it's actually happening.
Yeah, and I see a big reason why, maybe not cause why why this war is happening, but why Russian population accept this war is the reason they see Soviet Union as a good times, as a positive thing, and they don't see any negatives. So they try to return back to the positive times. But for the satellites, for the Soviet satellites, it wasn't only positive; there was a lot of negative as well.
Yes, and it's actually, yes, directionally it's correct, but it's much more complex, right? I would say none of the countries of the former Soviet Union really found their way clear paths to sort of, let's say, prosperity and bright future, and those who found that like least of that path, right, like Ukraine and Russia, and the majority was exception of think of the Baltic state. They still, I don't think that they also have sort of very clear pass out, but they sort of better than the rest. And so then it's natural tendency, like, let's go back to the past, right? And especially if you start forgetting the terrible part of the past, because you kind of like, oh yeah, it was like, you know, last whatever, since like, let's say 78 till 88 in the Soviet Union was relatively okay, right? It wasn't great, but like what people experienced was the fall of the Soviet Union was much worse. They would, okay, I'd rather be in that 78, 88 than let's say in 1993. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they compare, but this is sort of like irrational, you know, drive of the people. And the problem is that the damage that was done to societies in the former Soviet Union is so extensive that they're still recovering up till right now. Do you know what I mean? It's like you were so damaged that it's gonna take a long time to fully recover. And I'm not, and this damage is not even coming from Soviet Union. It started during Russian Empire. At least as far as I can, you know, and probably before that, like, you know, we don't have enough like detailed history before that, but I'm sure before that it was more. But this is effectively long term damage that was done to generally to, like, you know, Ukrainian society, Russian society, whatever, Belarus society, all of those countries over all of this centuries. And societies are weak. They don't have, how to say, thought leaders, quality thought leaders in any of these countries. So there is no vision, there is no good idea how to move forward.
Yeah, I can see that. And also in Russia, I don't know any time in history when Russian people actually protested or made a big change. Okay, there was a protest 1905 and 1917, but it wasn't, people didn't ask for something better. They were just saying like, I'm hungry, basically. I don't like this. But and the fall of Soviet Union, it didn't come from Russia. It came from the.
What's that?
So basically, Russian people have never demanded better life. I haven't seen it anyways.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There was a lot of damage. People who were demanded in the past, they got killed.
Yeah.
This has been going on in many for, it was very during communist time. It was on steroids, but during Russian Empire was something similar, right? Like
Yeah.
not as bad as during the communist time, but still bad.
Mm.
It was prison, right? Like, essentially this whole part of the world moved from prison to the concentration camp. That's, if you describe what the Russian Empire was prison, then the communism was a concentration camp.
It's very naive to expect Russians to rise up now and expect, demands change.
It's like someone is, lost half of its brain. How do you expect someone to really make very great, amazing decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Because someone else cut out half of the brain, whatever, quarter of the brain, third of the brain, cut some hands and hand or whatever leg. Like, I mean, how do you expect and that's what happened to these societies, in not just Russian, Ukrainian in the same boat. I mean, all of these societies of the former Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe the way to success is to study history and learn all the dark stuff, including the good stuff.
Yeah, but the problem is that the history is being, and that's actually reality everywhere. It's essentially propaganda taught by the government, their position. Basically, it's a lie in every country. Yeah. It's not just Ukraine, Russia. In the West, the same. It's just probably not as aggressive propaganda, but it's everywhere. So it's corrupted. And so how are you gonna learn? Majority of people are too lazy to learn the truth. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you really need to try hard, go out of your way and do that stuff. But like, if you are, I mean, I don't care about anything, right? Like, person like that. Like, I'm not saying about myself, but I'm just saying, like, someone, average person. I just want to live. I don't care about the history. And so whatever they heard in school and then on TV, that becomes the truth for them. And what you hear on TV and in the school is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
How to make Russians study past more accurately, so they can learn all the negative things they've done to themselves. And
I think they need to go through their own sort of journey. And people, I think the biggest mistake that's being done by the West actually is actually meddling into all of these countries where they should not be meddling at all. And these countries need to sort of go their own paths. It will take whatever it will take, and eventually they will get there. But you cannot force someone to be someone else. Like, similar like with Iraq or Afghanistan, right? All of the stories, it's failures.
Yeah.
And that's why you have such animosity towards the West in the rest of the world, right? Because the West was not able to show success stories, but it was only failure after failure. Like, the way the people see, like, outside of the West, that West comes and whatever, it was terrible place, let's say, some dictatorship, but it was something. And it viewed like, okay, and then they came and it's just the country ceased to exist, and it just, you know, like just gangs shooting at each other, essentially, right? Like with all of these countries, that's what happens. And so this is again goes back to this whole idea: you cannot make someone else to be, because it's about culture, and you cannot change culture by, like, let's say, it's not a problem of the government. That's because government really reflection of the people and reflection of the culture in whatever country. And so you just need to be respectful of, like, yeah, they crazy and all of that stuff, but they need to hit the wall on their own. Eventually they will wisen up. But it will take a long time. It's not going to happen in a year or 10 years. It's probably happens in 50 to 100 years, and you just need to let them be careful, not let them like hurt you, but let them sort of sit in their walls, in their territory, and if they want to kill themselves there, let them kill themselves. Like, you know, whatever they need to go through, you know what I mean? I don't even know. Whatever Russia needs to go through, it needs to go through.
Mm-hmm. But Ukraine seems to be, at least last couple of years, Ukraine seems to know what they want, more or less.
Yeah, like I think there's still a lot of I would say there's a lot of still this parasitic desires where in Ukraine, where there's thinking overwhelming, like, sort of consensus in the population. It's not really like, hey, let's have that's what I said, let's have a vision how we're gonna move forward, how we're gonna get better, whatever. But it's instead of like, okay, well, you know, Soviet Union was terrible place, let's join European Union, so they're gonna give us money, and we're gonna be like just kind of like continuing the way that we are, inefficient, you know, terrible place in many ways, right? Corrupt place. So they basically, there is huge desire just to switch, you know, to different, I would say, donor, let's put this way. I don't know how to better say it. And then there is a mix, and then there is a true, like, sort of feeling is like, this is why what people are finding right now is we want to be independent, right? We want to be, but that's not like, if you really think about this, like right now, people who fight, it's not, and really honestly, it's not even 50% of the population. It's about, say, 30% of the population that really want, like, hey, we want to be independent, right? Because, like, a lot of people, they don't want to, like, especially right now, when there is, like, it's very clear, like, hey, you know, there's a real chance of dying and all that stuff, and it's becoming much more clear that this is I would say death factory, right? So that, like, and then also becoming much more clear that how to say that there won't be like such an easy victory, because before people were thinking like, oh well, there will be this so-called lend-lease from the West, from the US, and we're going to get tons of most modern weapons, and we're just going to be pressing buttons and destroying Russians, and we're going to be safe, right? And then people realize like, well, you actually need to work, you need to really push yourself, you need to learn, you need to change. And many people don't want that. They want a sort of lazy, paternalistic life. This is what they learned in the Soviet Union, and they just basically, okay, well, so, and that is based on this, like, you know, as I said, 78 to 88 time period in the Soviet Union, right? So now they like, well, how about we'll find this? They think that they will get that from the European Union. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they will get these loans from your. That's why you have this like constant talking about like how much billions Ukraine will get to rebuild itself and all of that. So because people thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get, basically it's just desire for free money. They think that it's gonna be free money, the river or of the free money, and nothing needs to be done. Like, you can just live nicely and not do anything. You know what I mean? There is that part in Ukraine as well. That's not, I would say I don't like it, but there's a lot of people who sort of driven by that, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that this whole like that, oh, Ukraine shouldn't exist or whatever. That's because that what happens next is that this Russian propaganda sources, they will say, well, that's the reason Ukraine shouldn't exist. Well, it's not true, because there's significant minority of Ukrainians who want sort of like independence, and who realize that money is not coming, and you need to build your own country, your own future, right? And they fighting for their own independence, for the chance to have their own future and be sovereign, right? And so that's why it's never black and white. There's a lot of gray in between.
Mm-hmm.
But it's closer to white than to black.
Yeah. Yeah, well, countries never 100% united.
Yeah, I mean, yes, 100%. There's never. I mean, it's too big, too many people. They have different sort of visions and views and all that stuff. So yeah.
But now what Ukraine has gone through, and let's assume Ukraine is victorious in this war, will Ukrainian citizens accept the corruption if it keeps going like this? Or I would think people will rise up against the government as they've done before.
No, this is in a way this so-called financial support from the West really corrupts Ukraine and actually really hurts Ukraine. Like military support, great. Financial support is really right now, sure, Ukraine needs it because there's no economy and everything. At this point, it's not possible. But like in the past, it was corrupting, actually making Ukraine worse. It was hurting Ukraine because it actually enables corruption. Because then all this people in power, all they go there to steal this money that Ukraine would get from the West. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. It's like Soviet Union, basically same.
So yeah, no changes. And so this sort of financial, this loans from the West, they were perpetuating this corruption. So in a way, you really realize that maybe the West is not really interested in fighting corruption, but there are other motives. But doesn't matter. Like Ukraine is in the same boat with the West, no matter what, right? And I mean, if you're stupid enough to become corrupt and be corrupt, that's sort of your problem, right? And it's Ukraine.
Yeah. What do Ukrainians do at the moment? Like, there's obviously much less work, so a lot of people must be unemployed.
No, I mean, people who want to work, they have work. You know what I mean? Then I wouldn't yeah, I wouldn't say that there is a I wouldn't. This is not like literal, like everybody's lazy, I guess, right? Like there are people who like hardworking and they work and whatever, and there's people who like
I mean, at the moment, as the economy is shattered.
Yeah, I mean, people still try to work. Like it's not. Yeah, I guess it's from a big picture perspective. There's essentially pretty much no productive activities, right? Like by that I mean like producing something. There's very little of that left. Most of it is sort of like redistribution, like basically selling, reselling stuff, right? It just doesn't produce anything for the country. It's essentially distributing the money that that Ukraine gets from the West, which is well, there is a problem with in Ukraine is that the economic policies are horrific, that you cannot do you cannot have successful business in Ukraine in legal way. You're always going to be like doing something illegal because the rules are written in such a way that you cannot work like properly in legal way there. And has been done, in my opinion, this is obviously my opinion, is intentional by a lot of Russian agents that were basically in power in Ukraine, and there is very little sort of education among Ukrainian population, so it's very ignorant economically, still believes in all of those sort of communist values and how the communism was operating. And so this was kind of like then used by these agents who were pushing all of this sort of like communist practices in Ukraine. And there's essentially it's Ukraine still has a lot of like the old Soviet Union legislation wasn't canceled. It still works and exists. Even in Russia, it was canceled about like I think like 5 years ago. Do you mean? They passed a law saying, okay, all Soviet regulations are dead and everything. Ukraine, if there is no Ukrainian law, there's still Soviet regulation. And like right now, the guy who's sort of like economic advisor and driving economic policy for Ukrainian president, there's so much evidence he is Russian agent. And I'll be honest with you, like there's so much evidence that Ukrainian president knows that and himself is a Russian agent. Do you know what I mean? There is good, there's communist strategy. If you want to destroy whatever movement or something that you don't like and you don't have power physically to destroy it, become a leader of that movement and drive it into the ground through poor leadership. And that's what's, in my opinion, is happening with Ukraine right now. I mean, it has been happening since 1991, and right now it's really hurting. Because Ukraine is still alive, not thanks to the efforts of Ukrainian president, despite propaganda in the West, describing him as a sort of true source and why Ukraine is still there. No, it's not. It's nothing. And his team, which is, again, as I said, in my view, they are all Russian agents, or let's say KGB agents. Let's better say it's not even like it's KGB as an organization, agents. So that's my sort of allegations, because I don't want to be like, oh, this is my view, and that all of these people are doing everything they can to let this to hinder Ukrainians fight for its own independence, because this is worth independence for Ukraine.
Was there late 90s, I think, in Ukraine, there was president candidate, I don't remember the names, but it was, I don't know, pro-Western candidate who was very popular, and he died in mysterious car accident.
Yeah. Well, my view, he was killed by KGB, but whatever. Like, I mean, I don't have proof. But again, all those people, the problem was all of that. That again goes back to poor leaders, essentially no vision, no leadership in Ukraine. And in my view, most of the Soviet Union is, even those people who sort of what you call pro-Western, they don't offer anything except for like, oh, let's go join, West. But they don't have any idea of views, what needs to be done economically, like really from a governance perspective. In their minds, they're still Soviet people. They just say, well, it was bad in Soviet Union, let's go join the West. But the problem is the it's not just like West is just everything is perfect. If you are not intelligent, you're gonna get destroyed by the West. You know what I mean? Because you need to like there's a lot of bad things in the West, right? It's not like just like everything's perfect in the world. It's a perfect world. No, it's a place where you need to you need to use your brain, and that's what the sort of really defining part of the West is. Those who use their brain, they okay, they're doing well in the West. Those who don't, they really suffer and have big problems. And so if you don't have that brain, and then by that I mean at the collective, like social, like as a society at a societal level, right? Or it's severely impaired, that brain function, then you can get hurt by the West. And that's what I said is, like, example is this loans that Ukraine was getting, and they were just essentially enabling this corruption and destruction of the country for past probably 20 years, 25 years. Because Ukraine got hooked up on these loans starting about like 90, I want to say 97, 98. I mean, there was corruption before then, but then they ran out of the old Soviet resources to sort of steal, and then they're like, okay, well, let's take these loans from the West and we'll continue staying in the power and steal. And that's essentially enabled all of this bad, presidents, bad parliaments, and essentially it enabled this, parasitic existence for the, since then till now. In a way, it actually led to this war because, if you have corruption and all of that, you self-destroy yourself from within, and then you become very weak, and you becoming very, attractive prey for Russia, right?
Yeah.
So, and then at some point they determined, like, okay, it's weak enough, it's bad enough, let's attack it. Because it didn't happen. Let's say Russia didn't attack Ukraine. There was tension, like I remember there was tension about this Crimea starting like, I want to say like 93, 94. Like it was like 90s and like till 2001, there was quite a bit of tension with Russia. But they didn't attack Ukraine because there was still a lot of military power, economic power left from the Soviet Union. And they were not doing well either, right? It was kind of like situation where everything is, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I believe why Baltics are doing better now is as soon as Soviet Union collapsed, there was direction. You get away from Russia, basically.
Yeah, but
So
I actually disagree with you that the Baltic states found their way. I think they are really not doing that great, I'll be honest with you.
that's
In
true,
my
but
opinion.
at least
With the exception of Estonia, maybe a little bit better out of the three. Estonia is doing better,
maybe
but
slightly.
yeah, slightly like had. Let's say if I would rank, I would say Estonia is number one, and the other two are equally, let's say, backwards. Because they still practice this Soviet economic or sort of Soviet or communist approach where everything is being controlled and you need to have permission for everything. There's too much of that there still in all of these countries. And this is evident more by high taxation. These countries cannot compete with the high taxes that they have. They cannot compete with like Western Europe. And that's why people, all young people like leaving these countries, they dying essentially. Do you know what I mean? Because taxes means like lower taxes means economic freedom, if you really think about that. High taxes means there's no difference. It's essentially communism, because the communism is what is the essence of the communism is to take from the producers and to give it to parasites, and this done through taxation. And the higher the taxes, the more is being taken from the producer, the more parasitic things are happening in society.
So So what I'm trying to say is, I believe Baltics had no chance of surviving if they try to keep like one foot in Russia, one foot in Europe or West.
Oh, well, okay.
Russia would have
Yeah,
crushed.
no, I mean, they need to go, well, like, I mean, sure, like from, they need, yeah, well, I think from my perspective, Russia does not offer anything good. There's no vision. It's terrible. Like there's nothing. Like they don't offer anything. They offer sort of it's offering death and corruption. That's what Russia offers as a vision, even right now. Because what do they offer? Nothing. Just total corruption there.
Yeah.
And the point that Russia is bad is that their own population is collapsing, is dying off, not reproducing itself, right? Because that's really what's happening in Russia. They maintain it by getting this so-called Russian-speaking population from all over the former Soviet Union and importing a lot of people like immigrants. Like there's a lot of tensions inside of Russia from Central Asia, from from like Azerbaijan, like Armenia, all those places, right? And that creates like huge, like sort of ethnic issues in the Russia itself. And so, Russia has nothing to offer in terms of vision. It's itself. The country is itself in a dead end, and actually also in a situation where they also facing, as I said, 1917 moment, another one in their life as a country, because they also could not figure out how to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe Chechen is Chechen potential hotspot in future, or is
No? Why would they be hotspot? Like, no, there's nothing there. I mean, no, I don't
they're
see
happy?
that.
They're happy the way things are now.
Well, they are happy because they're getting money from the Russian, like from Russia, essentially, right? Like, but are they productive on their own? And I would say no.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you stop flow of Russian money to Chechnya, it's going to be terrible, like depression there.
Yeah, I guess.
So do they like? I mean, like as a society, as a you can always kind of like test it. As a society, is this productive? Do they produce something that others are interested in or need? That really like tells you like, okay, society is at least able to maintain itself or not. And like Chechnya, like they don't produce anything. They just essentially like having parasitic life of Russia's budget.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Russian government gives them money and they build something with that money, doesn't mean that they are productive or anything. It's just like pretty much every idiot can build something if you give that person money, right? It's not that hard to waste money, basically. If the question is, can you earn money? And I don't think Chechnya is earning any money.
Yeah.
On a big scale. I'm sure there are decent people there and all that stuff that who could do something, but like as a society, do they earn money? I don't think so. I mean, the same is true for Russia. Do they earn money? No, but they have tons of resources that they sell,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they were living off essentially. But that life is not.
If everything was done right,
What's that?
if in Russia in 90s, if everything was done right, best case scenario, and if the goal was to improve average person life in Russia in 30 years since collapse of Soviet Union, how would you how would people live right now compared to Europe? given the resources Russia has.
Oh no, Russia, like former Soviet Union, probably would be the most richest country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
If it were managed properly, it would rule the world. But there is no chance of that happening because it starts in the heads, in the brain.
Mm.
And if brains are sort of polluted with bad ideas and terrible ideas, they will never create anything, positive for the rest of the world and for themselves. And so, like when you say if something could have been done, it's not like there is some like dictator who can do things for someone else. That's what I'm saying, that culture matters. It's
Yeah.
every single person needs to be on the same page. And so that's why I said that it failed in whatever, in Afghanistan, Iraq, whatever other places out there, because people don't believe those values that were instilled on them, or don't see them as right, or they were not presented in an honest way. They were also, because there's also corruption in the West, right? There's desire to take resources from other countries and stuff like that to the West, right? And so it's not like, the West is perfect and everything. No, it's not. If you let yourself to be taken advantage by the West will do that to you.
And I assume same goes for Ukraine. If Ukraine.
No, I'm speaking for the entire this whole
Soviet,
the Soviet part. Like there's no different. It was so, how to say, evenly more or less destroyed by the communism that they all more or less on the same page. Which is not the same. There's not huge difference between, let's say, I don't know, Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus, or Georgia, or
yeah, my questions are a little bit all over the place today, but yeah.
No, that's fine. I mean, this is because the war is just a manifestation of deeper problems, really.
There's almost like two wars. So one is the physical with weapons at the front, and there's another war at the home front in the people's mind. And I don't know how and could we have war with in the home front, like informational war.
What do you mean? I'm not sure. I'm following.
So Russian people accept the war, accept what Putin is doing, and so I don't know. I feel like if they knew what is really happening or what the past was, they wouldn't accept current situation.
No, that's not. No, this is this is such a delusional thinking that somehow Russian people are unaware and somehow they will be enlightened and all of that stuff. No, they're not stupid. Like, you don't think yourself you stupid, right? Like people somehow think that Russian people are stupid and they're not aware of what's happening. No, they are aware that and they're okay with that, to be honest. The same as Chinese people aware what's going on in China. I'll be honest with you, the same as like I don't know, like like France was doing evil things during colonial times, and they were aware and they were okay with it. Like UK was doing terrible things during colonial times, right? Like, I mean, think about this. Like, I mean, read about this opium wars in China. Like, I mean, essentially, Britain hooked them up on narcotics because they didn't have money to buy stuff that they wanted from China, right? So it's not that that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of propaganda in every country about like what's really was happening, and people do evil things if they are not, like if they're not checked, their own greed and interest. I mean, look at this the slave trade, like to what? To the US, right? They were importing slaves, right? Like, what was it right? It was evil, right?
That's true, but they had like when British Empire has been collapsing for hundreds of years, basically, or at least 100 years. But they've had these internal, like they have these discussions happening inside. so they've had this. They have been analyzing their past negatives as well, but I don't think Russians have confronted their negative past.
Yeah, no, but the fair, but like look, fair, but like to be if you want to be really fair, like the recognizing your bad past is paying reparations to all of those people who were hurt by you. That's true real like that's true realization, because really it's not your words but your actions, and money is actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the same as like Russia should be paying reparations to all the people they hurt around them, right? Like the same, British Empire should pay reparations, but they're gonna go broke. They don't even have to pay reparations was like to India, right? Or whatever. To
Yeah, I guess
China
so.
for whatever they did there. Like I don't know, whatever. France did some evil things. So everybody, whoever who was empire did evil things, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this empire is evil by default, by definition of what it is. It's somehow it's presented was okay or civilization. No, there's no difference. I mean, it's distractions of someone's life to better your own life. And
Yeah,
yes, you create something in process, and some technological wonders, but that doesn't excuse destruction of someone's life.
mm-hmm. If I went to Russia and ask average person which country won World War II, what would they say?
Well, obviously Soviet Union, right?
Mm. I was expecting this. You say Russia, because
Well, I mean, okay, I don't know. Okay, yes. Okay, sure. They probably would say, well, depending on the leaning of the person. If this is
mm-hmm.
like really hardcore communist leanings, then they will say Soviet Union. If this is more sort of like nationalist Russian sort of leaning, then the person will say Russia.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no difference between those two. They all looking. It's sort of Russian imperialism, right? It just repackaged. The Soviet Union was Russian imperialist, but packaged in the communism wrapper. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think that yeah, this is the problem. Um, Russia didn't fight World War II. Soviet Union did, and yeah, so Soviet Union is not Russia. Like it's,
No,
I think it's.
it's not Russia. It's all of these people that lived in
Mm,
Soviet. I mean, and honestly, those people were not there by their will. They were forced to be there as well. To be fair, in that Soviet Union, there was not like was like, oh, we just want to be part. Create the Soviet Union. No, it was totally forced on everyone, right?
mm.
So
Well,
yeah, I
I'd
know what
really
else.
like to see Russians realize Soviet Union was not Russia. Like these not the same thing.
No, how are they gonna real like look, average person does not want to do much, right? They
Mm,
they they hear this stuff in school, then they hear this in on TV. So how do you expect the miracles don't happen?
yeah.
Like they don't happen. There's always people who curious who will learn on their own, but they will be tiny minority. And there is that, good tiny minority in Russia in every country. But the majority is whatever I learn in school, good enough, and I don't care about everything else.
Mm, yeah, go with the flow.
Yeah. I mean, wherever you live, you see the same story there. I mean, like, let's be fair. Whatever in the West, the same, but it's like, less, it's more subtle, like softer propaganda, but there's obviously also propaganda and people happy with it. They don't want to challenge anything, right? How many people challenge in the UK, like, okay, we did evil things to China, we did evil things to India, or whatever other countries Britain control. I'm sure they did more things, more bad things than just, nobody's like, oh no, everything's okay. We peacefully sort of separated, and everything's good. We brought them some civilization and this kind of stuff. But the reality of it is and I'm not saying it's all just black. Like those societies were also in their own problems, right? Like and in a way, it's like there's no there's it's just it is what it is. What happened, right? I mean, a French Empire, they did quite a bit of evil things in Africa. Like, so I don't know what to say.
Yep, I got it.
Like, I mean, I've seen like this interview from someone from like this French, from country, like someone that was in Africa, in France. He moved there from whatever country. I don't remember what it was, but he was like openly saying, "Hey, you guys screwed us up, and now we coming here to basically take it back." They also understand what's being done to them. He was literally saying, "You set us back in development. You prevented us our development," which is true.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they pay the price. All of this imperialism comes at a very high price of essentially potentially losing yourself. So, like, you look at all of these countries, they dealing with a lot of, like, whoever were like empires, they dealing with a lot of problems. Like let's say Norway doesn't deal with many problems. Like society is more or less okay, right? Like Finland, because they were not any empires. Like, I don't know who else, especially this industrial age, like empires, right? Like, because Portugal was empire, but it wasn't, I would say, it was kind of like really like in what 16th century, and I would say 17th century, but after that they really were not, like, they were essentially collapsed, like, you know what I mean? But like whoever was like in like this in the 19th century empire, and in the 18th century, I mean, these countries are like, they royally screwed themselves by being empires, and they facing these challenges, and they facing a lot of problems, and they will continue, in my view, until they actually pay reparations.
No, okay.
They will be suffering in their own ways, and but you know what, this is not Ukraine's problem. Ukraine's problem is to survive from Ukraine was never even independent for past 800 years. So Ukraine in this way lucky place, because it never committed any crimes on anyone else.
Yeah. Do you see the potential for this war to finish end this year?
No, it's so hard to say. I don't know. I don't. I mean, there's always potential. Like, I really don't. It's hard for me to imagine, unless Russia collapses. I don't know. That's kind of how I see it. Because you so far, or the West stops support for Ukraine. So this is kind of like two main scenarios. West cuts off support for Ukraine, and Ukraine basically gets conquered by Russia, and that's one outcome. And the other outcome is Russia collapses, and Ukraine takes back its territories. So it's not. I don't think that there won't be any like peace deal, because they're not really peace deals. They really just freezing the conflict and basically ensuring that it's going to happen in whatever 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years again. So that's not really a solution.
Yeah.
So in a way, the war is really like actually trying, like, it's bad, but that's because people could not agree, cannot figure out how to solve the problem in a peaceful way, then they go to war. So, and the problem is so bad that you really need to resolve it, so you cannot push it off, so it become the war. So in a way, you just kind of need to go through this problem, through the war, because you so I guess, on both sides unintelligent that you need to learn hard way. Well, on the Ukrainian side, Ukraine never, you know, was, aggressive or anything towards Russia by any means, but it was unintelligent in terms of internally weakening itself and destroying itself from within. So that was sort of what was unintelligent part in Ukraine.
Okay, we are running out of time.
Okay,
Gonna
whenever
wrap
you
this.
want again, I'm happy to do that.
Sounds good.
I don't know. There was not much to discuss military wise because honestly, right now it's kind of like everything is sort of frozen. I would say, really. There is this, offensive that may happen, may not happen. We'll see. I mean, Ukraine is being sort of pushed to have it, and I think internally there is huge sort of push from within Ukraine to sort of, okay, let's sort of, come, because people want to feel like we're coming closer towards the end of it because it's very painful. But I'm not sure that it's going to be very successful.
We'll find out fairly soon. Looks like.
Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, there are some indication that the Russian army is sort of very rotten from within and not willing to fight. It's like recently, right? This is more like a recent developments from what I see around Bakhmut, but I'm not sure that this is true for the entire Russian army. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems like Russians are worried anyways at the moment.
There's definitely some positive signs for Ukraine that maybe you don't need to be that great and you can still beat Russia because Russia is becoming so sort of rotten from within as well that it's not holding together. So we'll see. But I don't know. I'm not inside of Russia. I'm not in that society to really be sort of like, oh, I know for sure that this is the case.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see if Russia suffers another defeat on battlefield, how Russian society reacts.
That's what I'm saying. That's probably going to be 1917 moment there. Because both countries, and I'm not, probably other countries need that as well, but like I can speak only for two. Both countries need 1917, and in hopefully in a positive way, not in a negative, but it can be in a negative way too. But that will probably then push both countries to like sort of fragmentation and falling into pieces. It's possible. Not so much probably with Ukraine, but more with Russia. If they don't find sort of positive way, how positive vision for themselves.
Yeah, so it could be 1917 moment or 1991 moment.
Yeah, but 1917 that turns into 1991. Yeah, totally possible. Which way it will go, we'll find out. Nobody knows.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna
Sounds good.
go on with my day. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay,
have a good day, right? You have morning, right?
Morning, yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, enjoy Sunday.
Thank you.
Bye bye.